Hi everybody. I'm supposed to bang the gavel. It's in the rules. My name is David McNeil. I'm a member of the events committee of the FCCJ and freelance journalist. Today's speakers, Masako Sakata and John Mitchell. I'll briefly introduce them and get out of the way. Sakata-san was married to Greg Davis. He was a photographer and a longtime member of the FCCJ. Some of you may remember him. Greg died of liver cancer just a few weeks short of his 55th birthday in 2003. Sakata-san believes the cancer stemmed from his exposure to Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. Agent Orange was a cocktail of herbicides used by the US military to clear forest cover and crops for the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops. Sakata-san explored these issues in a documentary film which won awards called Agent Orange, A Personal Requiem. She now has a new film on the subject which is called Long Time Passing. She's going to show, or we're going to show, a short clip from that in a second. Our other speaker is John Mitchell. John Mitchell is also no stranger to the club. He has been since 2010 investigating the US military's use of Agent Orange in Okinawa, which was a vital military base, of course, during the Vietnam War. The US was believed to have used Agent Orange in Okinawa, Guam, and other Pacific islands, but it continues to deny that. And I think John will be talking about some of the latest developments that have happened in relation to US admissions over the use of Agent Orange. The Vietnamese government says that as many as 3 million of its citizens have become sick or disabled because of exposure to Agent Orange. Of course, the US military denies those figures. I hope this will come up during the discussion. It's worth noting in passing that Britain helped pioneer the use of herbicides to be used as weapons, and hopefully we can talk about that as well. So I'll get out of the way, and I believe we're going to show a short clip of Sakata-san's new movie, and then we'll go straight into her talk. If you haven't already, could you switch off your mobile phone, please? Thank you.
'Because of the spraying of toxic chemical substances during wartime in Vietnam.
Nghĩ đâu cùng chó quá, nếu mà hết hơi được thì cũng phải chịu, mà kêu hết hơi được thì phải chịu như vậy không chịu.
Thì nói dùng cái chơi, dùng cái trò điện cho một số phần của ai vợ chồng rồi thì có nhiều thôi.
Important good job, and then we have handicap like me.
What is the difficulty?
Cái tô phía trên nha chị.
I'm happy I live by myself, independence in everything.
Puis au cours de ces 35 années qui m'ont suivi, seul qui en souffre toujours, je désirerais faire mon devoir de mémoire.
That's not part of the movie. Sakata-san, onegaishimasu.
Hi. Thank you very much for coming to this press conference today. Today, I want to talk about one of the largest ecocide in human history, which is Agent Orange. 72 million liters of defoliants were sprayed by the US military over South Vietnam between 1961 and 71. Defoliant spraying was begun in an effort to deny cover to guerrillas by eliminating the jungle foliage. As the war escalated, the spraying of defoliants increased dramatically, and much of the land in south of Vietnam was contaminated and left barren. The defoliant, known as Agent Orange, was made from the same chemical substances as herbicides used in the United States for agricultural purposes, but it was 25 times as potent. Agent Orange also contained dioxin, the most toxic chemical ever produced. Dioxin remains in the environment for many decades and causes a variety of health problems. Several million Vietnamese and American soldiers who fought in Vietnam were affected by Agent Orange. Their children and grandchildren continue to suffer the effects. Dioxin remains in the soil of Vietnam today, and the land has yet to recover. My husband, Greg Davis, a photographer, also a Vietnam veteran, passed away 19 years ago of the illness suspected to be caused by Agent Orange. He was a member of FCCJ and often spent time at the club when he was not on assignment. His colleague, Maurice Hale, described Greg as follows. Big and burly, Greg Davis could walk into a club wearing his customary boots, windbreaker, open-necked shirt, and white green. And we would be transported to dusty Central Asian dictatorship or cloying Cambodian jungle. A remembrance that the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan started off as a correspondence club after World War II. His death came so suddenly, and I was lost. In order to cope with the loss and the sadness, I wanted to know what Agent Orange was all about, and possibly make a film about it. It was a far-fetched idea since I had never made a film, but I was so desperate at the time and was ready for a new challenge. I enrolled in a digital film workshop in a small town in Maine. The course was for 2 weeks and was for beginners with no experience. It was a time when photography and filmmaking were becoming digital and made available for non-professionals. In 2 weeks, I learned how to use digital video camera and edit the footage in computer. I was impressed with the realization that even I could make a film. On my return home, I purchased a Sony digital camera and went to Vietnam in 2004. It was a trip full of anxiety. I wondered if Greg's death was really caused by Agent Orange. I was not sure if I could meet any victims of Agent Orange. I was not sure if I could even film anything, having no journalistic experience. But once I got to Vietnam, people were very helpful, and I got to see the effects of the defoliants. The victims were everywhere, in the cities and in the countryside. Victims were suffering in different ways. Since I was new in handling video camera, I could barely catch up with what's happening in front of my eyes. I witnessed victims going through a difficult life with courage, the families living in poverty and hardship, yet full of love. I was empowered and healed by them. This resulted in a film, Agent Orange, A Personal Requiem, which was released in 2008. And thus, I started a new career as a filmmaker at the age of 55. During 20 years since then, I made films on themes like nuclear issues and renewable energy, as well as sequels to Agent Orange. Facing big themes like this alone, I sometimes felt helpless, but kept going on, believing that my small steps could lead to more knowledge that I can share with others in the form of documentary film. Today, anyone can make films and share it on SNS. The world is inundated with information. It has its merits and demerits, but one thing for sure is that it does not necessarily require a big organization to make a documentary film. A small and independent person like me can be a witness to a small segment of history and share it with others. It is a wonderful thing. After having made a couple of documentaries on Agent Orange, I kept returning to Vietnam and followed the situation. Vietnam has accomplished a remarkable economic growth, and the war has become a history of a long time ago. More and more young people in Vietnam don't even know about the Vietnam War or American War, as they call it. But the victims of Agent Orange are left behind. There are many second and third generation victims, and even fourth generation are being born. The parents who are taking care of the affected children are getting old and weak, and sometimes dying. And the big social issue is who will take care of those children after the parents are gone. The victims of Agent Orange that I have met over the course of 20 years have compelled me to make yet another film on Agent Orange. 20 years ago, a Vietnam veteran told me, to see children affected by Agent Orange makes you realize that wars don't end. It just goes on and on and on. That's why you don't have wars. His voice resonates in me today. The war in Ukraine gives me a déjà vu feeling. Long time has passed since the Vietnam War ended, and Ukraine is on the other side of the continent. But the same things are repeated. The title of my film, Long Time Passing, is from the second phrase of the anti-war song, Where Have All the Flowers Gone? The song ends with a refrain of, oh, when will they ever learn? Really, when will we ever learn? It is a big question. We may never learn, but we must make efforts to answer this eternal question. In this film, I wanted to tell the story of the people victimized by the powerful, the story that may easily be forgotten and buried under the current of history. I want their voices to be heard. I want to stress that Agent Orange is not a problem of the past and of the country far away, but it is an issue affecting our life today. Now I will hand the floor over to John Mitchell, who has been investigating Agent Orange in Okinawa and has made remarkable findings. John, please.
Thank you, Masako. Long Time Passing, Masako-san's powerful documentary. It shows how the damage of Agent Orange extends beyond generations. But in the same way, the damage of Agent Orange extends beyond geography. Not only did the US military use Agent Orange in Vietnam, but also in Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and along the Korean DMZ. Last month, President Joe Biden signed a new law. The name of the law is the PACT Act, which acknowledged American veterans had also been exposed to Agent Orange in 3 more locations: Guam, Johnson Island, and American Samoa. So what about here in Japan? Today, the American government is paying compensation to at least 21 American veterans. The name of the law is the PACT Act. Let me go back a little bit. So today, the American government is paying compensation to at least 21 American veterans who were sickened by Agent Orange while serving on Okinawa. These veterans were exposed at bases spread throughout the island. from Naha Port in the south through Kadena Air Base, Camp Schwab, and the northern training area. According to the testimonies of these veterans, they offloaded Agent Orange from ships, they trucked it across Okinawa, they breathed its fumes when it was sprayed around fences and runways, and they were exposed when they handled contaminated equipment that had been returned from the fighting in Vietnam. As a result of their exposure to Agent Orange on Okinawa, these American veterans are suffering from severe illnesses, including lung cancer, prostate cancer, and leukemia. For many of you, the presence of Agent Orange in Japan might come as a surprise, but you have to remember that Okinawa was fundamental to the US military. In 1965, the commander of the US Forces Pacific, he said, "Without Okinawa, we could not continue fighting the Vietnam War." During the war, 3/4 of American war supplies passed through Okinawa. There were 1 million flights through Kadena Air Base, and at the time, as many as 50,000 Okinawans were employed by the military on their bases on the island. During the Vietnam War, Okinawa possessed one of the most concentrated stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction on the planet. There were around 1,000 nuclear warheads, 13,000 tons of chemical weapons, such as sarin and mustard agent, and also the military conducted biological weapons tests on the island as well. So against this backdrop, you shouldn't really be surprised that Agent Orange was there on Okinawa. And at the time, during the Vietnam War, the Okinawan media, they were reporting incidents involving Agent Orange in the island. For example, in 1968, there were 230 Okinawan children, and they were swimming in the sea near Gushikawa, and some of the kids were burnt. And some of them were burned so badly from swimming in that sea that they had to be admitted to hospital. At that time, American military was spraying Agent Orange along the shoreline, and also dozens of deformed frogs were found in the vicinity as well. Then, in 1973, there was an incident on Iejima Island. Iejima Island is the birthplace of the Okinawan peace movement. And in the past, the military had stolen the farmers' land, but the landowners insisted on their right to keep farming it. So to discourage them, first of all, the military sprayed gasoline and set fire to their crops, but the farmers kept farming. And so at that point, the military used defoliants. This is in 1973. And the use of these chemicals against peaceful protesters is an unprecedented assault on human rights. Then, in 1981, there was another incident involving Agent Orange at Futenma Air Station, aka the world's most dangerous airbase. At that time, in 1981, a working party of Marines, they discovered around 100 buried barrels which had been dumped by their predecessors, and some of the barrels were marked with Agent Orange's telltale orange stripe. In reaction, what did Futenma's commanding officer do? He ordered the discovery hushed up, and the barrels were reburied elsewhere. Just like that commanding officer of Futenma, for many, many years, the American government has tried to conceal its usage of Agent Orange on Okinawa. For a long time, the American government denied the presence of Agent Orange on Okinawa based on two main premises. First of all, it said that Agent Orange was never stored, nor was its component chemicals stored on Okinawa. Secondly, the American government said no ships carrying Agent Orange had ever stopped in Japan or on Okinawa. In recent years, both of those denials have been debunked. In 2013, barrels containing all three components of Agent Orange were unearthed on land formerly used by Kadena Air Base. And then in 2018, the US Government Accountability Office released a report, and in this report it revealed that at least 2 ships carrying Agent Orange had visited Okinawa and Japan. That was in 1969 and 1970. So as I said at the start of my talk, the American government is now paying compensation to at least 21 veterans. These veterans were sickened by exposure to Agent Orange on Okinawa. But there are hundreds of other service members whose health claims have been rejected. You see, despite all of this evidence of the presence of Agent Orange on Okinawa, the American government has not officially admitted it. Many Okinawa veterans were bitterly disappointed that the island was omitted from the new PACT Act, which, as I mentioned earlier, just added Guam, American Samoa, and Johnston Island. So why? At the heart of the American government's failure to add Okinawa are 2 main reasons. And these same reasons will be familiar when you watch Masako-san's documentary about the whole Agent Orange debacle. The root of the problem is money and politics. During the Vietnam War, hundreds of thousands of troops were stationed on Okinawa. The American government believes the costs of compensating all those sick veterans and their families would be exorbitant. For Washington, there's always money for new wars, but there's never money to clean up the damage from past ones. The more important reason for the refusal is politics. Today, the American military has 31 bases on Okinawa. Many Okinawans are deeply unhappy bearing this disproportionate burden, as you saw with the re-election of Governor Tamaki last Sunday. If the American government admitted to having stored and sprayed Agent Orange on Okinawa, it would spark even more anger amongst the population of Okinawa. In closing, I think everybody has to understand this issue against the backdrop of another environmental tragedy that's unfurling on Okinawa. It's unfurling on Okinawa today as I speak. It's a tragedy involving what many people call the Agent Orange of the 21st century. On Okinawa, the military has contaminated the drinking water of 450,000 residents with PFAS forever chemicals. These are substances found in firefighting foams. And there are numerous similarities between this ongoing catastrophe with PFAS as with the dioxin of Agent Orange. These 2 chemicals are toxic in tiny concentrations. Both substances persist in the human body and the environment for decades. The 2 problems have been enabled by corporate and military incompetence, followed by a prolonged cover-up, and exacerbating, making worse both of these problems, has been a deafening silence from most of the mainstream media about these issues. So this current catastrophe of PFAS contamination on Okinawa, it makes the timing of Masako-san's documentary so very important. To understand the crimes of today, it's important to understand the crimes of the past, and the lessons of long time passing are vitally relevant for Japan in 2022. I urge all of you to watch Masako-san's important documentary and heed well the insights that it reveals. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Sakata-san. I will, as always, get out of the way if there's any questions. If you want to ask a question, could you put up your hand? Please indicate that you would like to ask one, and then you come to the microphone and identify yourself. I'll bags the first question, if that's okay. I don't see any hands for now. I'm just wondering about the significance of the fact that you wrote about this in the Okinawa Times, John, right? That the United States Department of Veteran Affairs is paying at least 21 US service members sickened from Agent Orange. So they've identified them as having been sickened by Agent Orange on Okinawa. Yeah, on Okinawa.
Exactly, yeah.
So what's the criteria for identifying people, and why doesn't that open the floodgates to more compensation, I suppose, is the obvious question.
So it's quite complicated, but what you have to understand is that the Veterans' Appeals decisions, they are not precedential. So that means that even if one member gets compensation for exposure on Okinawa, it does not open the floodgates for all service members to receive the same compensation. Unlike civilian courts, where rulings set a precedent, with the Board of Veterans' Appeals, it doesn't do so. And so when you read these accounts from the Board of Veterans' Appeals website, and all of them are linked on that Okinawa Times article you mentioned, you can read the circumstances under which these individual veterans received compensation. So usually what pushed their claim into being successful was buddy statements. That means that other service members came forward and they agreed that they were working together with that veteran. Also, there is a great deal of triangulation. So there are documents created by the American military that state there was Agent Orange on Okinawa. These documents say there were 25,000 barrels of Agent Orange on Okinawa that was then moved to Johnston Island. Also, they state a herbicide stockpile at Kadena Air Base. So every week I receive emails from American service members and their family who are sick, who are dying, and I do my best to help them. All of the documents proving Agent Orange on Okinawa are uploaded online just to enable anybody to access them.
So what that seems to imply is that there's a sort of an arbitrariness about the compensation, well, the recognition and the compensation procedure, and also it goes to particularly tenacious or well-connected people. Would that be a fair interpretation?
I would say that tenacity is really, really important, and also following through on your appeal. Sadly, when a veteran's appeal is rejected, many veterans give up at that point because they don't know the system, or also they pass away. These veterans are in their 70s, some of them are in their 80s, and their appeal is rejected, and they die before they can re-appeal it. These cases take many, many years to be solved, and these cases take a lot of time to go through the system. So I really am delighted that Guam veterans won their appeal, they won their case. You know, anybody who was stationed with the military in Guam during the Vietnam War is automatically eligible for coverage. But I really wish that same coverage was awarded to Okinawan veterans because the circumstances are identical. The records are there, the statements are there. But because Guam is an American territory, then this is why America, I think, opened up for Guam veterans, but not Okinawa. Like I said, it's politics and it's money.
So that's the significance of the Biden recent admission or the PACT Act, right? Yeah.
As you know, Biden's son passed away from military exposures. He was exposed to burn pits, and that's why Biden has a personal stake in providing compensation to service members who've been exposed to toxins in service.
Just on a point of clarification, so what I understand just from my reading, and it's a very shallow reading, is that there was a class action lawsuit in 1979 by US service men and women, and that was settled out of court in 1984. 250,000 claimants and their families were compensated. And separately, the Department of Veteran Affairs has awarded compensation to about 1,800 veterans. But those are all historical agreements, right? And presumably a lot of people have been left out of them.
So when the agreement was made in 1984, the chemical makers, they knew they were about to lose. And so they decided to settle out of court without any admission of guilt. And that process, it denied future veterans from suing the makers of these terrible chemicals. And the lawyers, they took off a huge chunk of that compensation package. And the veterans themselves at that time, I think they received $12,000 for lifetime disability. without any input from them, agreeing to this settlement. And this is what Masako-san features in her documentary, where one French citizen, if you'd like to talk about that.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask, obviously address that question, but I was also going to ask you about the general situation in Vietnam, because we've been talking about mainly U.S. servicemen and women. What's the story? What's the legacy of Agent Orange in Vietnam? People sick and so on.
Well, America has agreed to compensate that they're responsible for the contamination of the land, especially the American bases. Da Nang, the big places are Da Nang, Bien Hoa, and Pleiku. And they have cleaned up, in the past 10 years, they have finished the cleanup of Da Nang Air Base. Now they are going to start Bien Hoa Air Base. And they think it's going to take 10 years. And that may be a optimistic estimate too. But they have not admitted the guilt for contaminating, for affecting the human health. And when you go to Bien Hoa, there's a map of the contamination and the map of the water seeping out from it. And I visited the area of the water contamination, and there are so many households with handicapped children. So America has acknowledged that it has done harm to U.S. veterans, but no health impact on Vietnamese. But they say, we are not responsible, but since we are humanitarian, we will make some payments for humanitarian concerns, but not admitting guilt.
So not overall guilt. I'm just looking around the room again just to see if anybody has a question. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. There are questions online which I will raise now, just while I wait. The first question is from Fedvarko, who's a freelancer at this club. What evidence do you have, this is to Masako-san, what evidence do you have that Greg's cancer was caused by Agent Orange, is his question. And there's a question for John as well, which I'll ask you to ruminate on. Can you talk more about the media response in Japan and elsewhere to your research? And maybe, John, if you could address the mainland media, is the mainland media effective in covering Okinawa? I'm pretty sure what the answer is, but Masako-san, onegaishimasu.
I have no proof that my husband's death was related to Agent Orange. It may have been, it may not have been. But the more I do the research on Agent Orange, the more I'm convinced that it was probably because of Agent Orange. As I started to do this filming almost 20 years ago. And at that time, I learned that we were at the age of 55. And I learned that Vietnam veterans, about 1/3 of the population was dead, was gone. And at the age of 55, you look at classmates, nobody's dead. Yes. So, there's no cause and effect proof, but it is very likely that I'm becoming more and more convinced that my husband's death was related to Agent Orange. And there is 17, at that time, there were 17 illnesses listed as probably caused by Agent Orange, which was included, which was compensated. It can be compensated by U.S. government, but my husband's sickness, which was liver cancer, was not listed in the U.S. list, but in Vietnam it's the first. So there are a lot of unknown elements. But it doesn't matter whether I can prove that his death was by Agent Orange or not. I got a chance to look into the situation, and I could, through my small efforts, I could bring out the past problem into today's.
Thank you. John, the media response?
So could you repeat the question?
Sure. Well, the exact question is, can you talk more about the media response in Japan and elsewhere? My addition to that would be, are you able to talk a little bit about the mainland media coverage of Okinawa, this issue in particular? Yeah, is it effective? Is it what you would expect?
I'm a special correspondent for Okinawa Times, and I've been writing for Okinawa Times, I think, since about 2016. I want to say, and it really surprises me, this gap in coverage by mainland Japanese language media and Okinawan media. I think on Okinawa there's a strong history of reporting about military issues in a strong way. Okinawan media really sees media as public service journalism. If you go to Naha, in Naha near the coast, there's a memorial for Japanese journalists who died during World War II. And every year, Okinawan journalists, they go to this memorial and they promise not to use their pens to romanticize the military. Because of the experiences of World War II, in Okinawan media, they are much more prepared to investigate, they're much more prepared to question compared to the mainland media. I think at the heart is the experience of journalists during the Vietnam War, where many Okinawan journalists were reporting about how B-52 bombers were taken off from Kadena Air Base, how Okinawan women were getting raped, were murdered by American service members at that time. And so that tradition of critically holding the military to account, it extends today in the Okinawan media. But here in mainland Japan, the media is much more reluctant to report on Okinawan issues. The main problem that we've been looking at is the drinking water contamination. In Okinawa, the drinking water for 450,000 people has been contaminated. And this issue has been front page of Ryukyu Shimpo, Okinawa Times on a weekly basis. But here in the mainland, most people have never heard of PFAS. Most people don't know about its risks. And neither the mainland TV stations nor the mainland newspapers report on this issue. So it's always been the case that what happens on Okinawa stays on Okinawa. And this problem is not reported widely throughout Japan. One of the problems is that the Japanese media in general does not use the Freedom of Information Act. The American Freedom of Information Act is this fundamental tool for journalists, but unfortunately, mainstream Japanese media do not use it. So I really believe that mainstream journalists in Japan are failing the people of Japan because they're not using this very vital resource to dig into what's happening on Okinawa and what's happening in mainland Japan as well. This problem of PFAS contamination, it's not only in Okinawa. Also, it's happening at Atsugi. It happened recently at Yokosuka. It's happening around Yokota. It's at Misawa. So wherever the American military has air bases, then this problem of PFAS contamination occurs. So I really wish the Japanese government would act. I wish the Japanese media would act to investigate this issue and hold the military to account for contaminating so many people's drinking water.
Thank you. Roger, I see your hand up if you'd like to come up and ask a question. Yeah. Just tell everybody who you are if you'd be kind enough.
Roger Pulvers is my name. Thank you both for continuing to bring this issue to the fore at a time when so many people just want to forget about it. And yet I can see just once again today how vital and how timely it is, even in 2022. I'd just like to pick up something that on something that John said, and Dave, I know this is something that you're very concerned with too. What causes the conspiracy of silence about Okinawa? So it's just not, I'm sure that the journalists are not accessing information from in the Freedom of Information Act from that. But is it that the Japanese government doesn't want to offend their best friend and mentor and protector? Or is it something even deeper that goes to the Japanese discrimination against Okinawans and treating them like second-class citizens? Why is it the editors? Is it the owners of the newspapers? And is there any way of bringing this issue out as well? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and it is a question that I often ask myself on a daily basis about why doesn't the mainland media report on these issues. One is they feel afraid of online net uyoku. So there's a large contingent, maybe not so large, there is a contingent of right-wing critics online who will attack Okinawan journalists. And they will attack anybody who writes about Okinawa and tries to defend Okinawa. Also, as you know, the Japanese government itself has made quite anti-Okinawan mass media comments in the past. And so there's a combination of the online community and also Japanese politicians and also the Japanese government. Of course, at its heart, it's an issue of discrimination. Okinawa used to be an independent kingdom. Okinawa was invaded by Japan. It was seized and turned into a prefecture. Okinawan languages were banned. Okinawan tattooing was banned. And then Okinawa was sacrificed in World War II as a steishi, as a throwaway stone to delay the American invasion of the mainland. So for many people in mainland Japan, Okinawa is disposable. Okinawa is somewhere that can be treated as a colony or a semi-colony where things can be done that can't be done here in the mainland. You only have to look at the storage of nuclear weapons on Okinawa, that Okinawa existed as a place where the American military was given total control. And this is important now because it's the 50-year anniversary of Okinawan reversion. But even after 50 years, the majority of the American military presence is on the island. A new military megabase is being built on beautiful Oura Bay in northern Okinawa. But Okinawan people have a spirit of defiance. And when you look at the recent re-election of Tamaki Denny, that really shows just how strongly Okinawans' resistance to the military is. But unfortunately, the mainland Japanese government ignores the will of Okinawan people. Repeatedly, Okinawans at the ballot box, they've shown their resistance to militarism, but repeatedly at the same time, the Japanese national government has ignored it. And I really think this is a failure of the media as well. The media doesn't report on these issues. International media doesn't report on these issues. When you run a search for the latest newspaper stories about Okinawa, usually it's about Okinawan diet. Usually it's about World War II. They don't report on these new issues. And I had a really eye-opening experience. Like 2 years ago, my book was published about contamination on Okinawa. And I was asked by many mainstream newspapers in the United States and in Britain to send a review copy of this book. So I sent out review copies of this book, and I waited, and I waited, and I sent emails, did you receive the book? And nobody even replied to my emails. Even 2 of these international correspondents, they unfriended me on Facebook. So it's that level of antipathy, that level of not wanting to engage with what's happening on Okinawa. And in the coming years, as Japan, United States look to confront China, then it's going to become even worse, where Okinawa again will be sacrificed in this war of the superpowers. And so I'm really afraid for the future of Okinawa. I think we're entering into a very, very dangerous few decades. And I really worry that Okinawa is going to get dragged into war again and sacrificed by these great powers. I hope I'm wrong too.
I think we all hope he's wrong. Well, my experience, just by the way, as a sort of comment, dealing with editors of well-known publications in the UK was, we feel sorry for the Okinawans, but we're afraid of China, was the line. That was the line that you always got. That the bases are, it wasn't maybe put that bluntly, but the bases are necessary and the Okinawans have to be the sacrificial lambs. Which is a perfect segue into the next question. This is a question from Kaldon Azari, who is a former president of the club. How do you evaluate the position of the Japanese government or Japanese governments, successive governments, especially the environmental ministry, I should say, on the issue of Agent Orange? So how do you evaluate their position? I mean, how do you think, you've already said they're not, but do you think they're effective in pushing for a resolution of the Agent Orange problem, particularly the environmental agency? Has it been an effective lobby on this issue?
Do they care? I don't think they care. I don't think they realize that it's an issue. And also, the Agent Orange problem is not only in Okinawa and Vietnam. Recently, it has been reported that there are 54 places in Japan where the dumped Agent Orange from 1971 has been discovered. And with this climate change, there's a lot of flood, and they are afraid of leakage of dioxin from that. So it's not only in Okinawa that they don't report. They don't report. Even in Japan, the local news don't report. It happened in Kumamoto, and only Kumamoto newspaper and TV stations reported, but not worldwide. So I'm not aware of what they're doing, the Japanese government is doing about Agent Orange.
54 places around Japan, including Kumamoto. Anywhere else closer to Tokyo?
All over Japan.
All over Tokyo.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, another thing that Japan is very lax about Agent Orange is the sales of defoliants, not defoliants, weed killer, like Roundup has been forbidden in Europe, and there was a big lawsuit in California. The man was awarded 320 oku yen, or something like that. But when you go to supermarket in Japan, it's full of weed killer. What do you call it? Just those like herbs. Weed killer. Yeah.
And so also there was a push to add herbicides to the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention and similar conventions, they ban the use of chemical weapons in warfare. But for a long time, America claimed that Agent Orange and defoliants were not a chemical weapon. And so when it came to the vote, Japan sided with the United States. Japan sided with America not to classify Agent Orange as a chemical weapon because in theory it only targets vegetation. It doesn't target human health. But of course, dioxin is one of the most toxic substances known to humanity, and its toxicity is measured in the trillionth of the gram. So I think it's despicable. I think the governments of the world should really watch Masako-san's documentary and should really pay attention to this issue.
Right. Well, while I was researching this talk, I came across some like really striking stuff I wasn't aware of. I always thought that Agent Orange was a byproduct of the war or an attempt to, get at the enemy, if you like. But the military documents that I looked at said, for example, this is British military documents from after the war, that defoliants were more speedy than a blockade and less repugnant than the atomic bomb. And for the purposes of internal security within the British Empire, they were quite effective. So that makes it really clear. I mean, even 20 years before Vietnam, they were considered a kind of a weapon of war, not a byproduct of it, if you like.
And so just to add to that, at the forefront of this research was Unit 731. So the Japanese scientists in China during World War II, they did a lot of investigations into how to use chemicals to kill crops. And after World War II, the American military, they seized the documents. Actually, they exchanged the documents in return for allowing these war criminals to go free. And a lot of the American post-war defoliant research after 1945 was based on Japanese military research that had been conducted in China. Then, as he said, the British sprayed chemical weapons in Malay, in the Malay crisis, in order to stop guerrillas, as they call them, to get food products. So there's this deep, deep history dating back to before World War II of the research into these chemicals. And actually, America had planned to use defoliants on Japan. So in World War II, the American military was going to spray small islands where there were Japanese holdouts in order to get rid of their food. And also they were going to spray it across mainland Japan to get rid of rice crops, to starve Japan into submission. But because Hiroshima bombs were dropped, then the American military abandoned those plans. So this history of the use of these chemicals, it goes back before the Vietnam War, and it goes back to World War II.
Fascinating. The next question is from Dennis Normile, who is a former president of the club as well. He's with Science Magazine. Are these defoliants still manufactured and used, and if so, where?
Yeah, they are. Monsanto, for instance, is making Roundup, and it's being sold in bulks in Japan. But I don't think they are being used for military reasons.
So not in warfare, as far as we're aware?
Not that, no.
And just on the issue, if I can ask a political question, on the issue of Tamaki-san's recent election victory, do you think that makes the fight for compensation, or at least revelations about this issue, do you think it makes it more likely to happen?
I mean, I'll be honest, even Tamaki's predecessor, Nakaima, who was fairly conservative, he confronted the American ambassador, Roos, to investigate this issue. When we first started breaking these stories about 10 years ago, then the Nakaima, he asked the American ambassador to investigate this issue, to come clean on this issue, and to see which parts of Okinawa had been impacted. So throughout Okinawan society, no matter which political position people take, they're really concerned about the environment of their island. But I think at the same time, this was balanced with some fear of negative rumors. So if people start to connect Okinawan agriculture with chemical contamination, just like Fukushima, then a lot of people backed off at that point, and they were too afraid to investigate for fear of sparking these rumors that would harm Okinawan tourism and also Okinawan agriculture. So there was some reticence that crept in.
That was why Vietnam has been quiet at a certain period of time. Vietnamese were quiet about Agent Orange contamination because of the export of the shrimps and rice. They didn't want to harm that. Also, may I touch upon the lawsuit going on in France? This French-Vietnamese woman called Chan To Nha has sued chemical companies last year, and because France has a special law which allows a French person to sue a foreign country. The Vietnamese people have been trying to sue chemical companies and the American government, but they said that it was rejected, they were not accepted. So with this new legal suit in Paris, they tried, but the court ruled that French court has no authority to rule the action of American government. So that was the first denial. But now they're trying to sue again. So the legal fight continues in Paris.
What's the name of would you name the plaintiff again, the woman again?
Chan To Nha.
How do you spell that?
Tran.
Yeah.
Teo.
Yeah.
Nga.
Okay. And that's an ongoing lawsuit?
Yes.
An ongoing lawsuit. Okay, thank you very much. Well, we're nearly out of time. If you'd like to, make a statement at the end, that would be wonderful, and then we'll tell everybody where they can see your movie.
Yeah, well, I do have an English version, but not in public, not released yet. We're trying to have it in French and Vietnamese, so I hope it will become more available internationally. But the audience for this movie is not that big, but I feel that it's important to dig the past, to bring the voices of the forgotten people now to the under the sun. So I hope my film serves that purpose of bringing the past into today's reality.
So at the moment it's showing in Japanese you said in Osaka, is that right?
Osaka and Kyoto, and it will go on Takasaki. Sorry that the screening in Tokyo has just finished.
Right, but presumably at some point it may be released online with subtitles.
Yes,
that's a possibility.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe if there's somebody out there who can do subtitles.
It's subtitled and it's ready to go.
It's subtitled in English.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, we'll hope for the best then. So the movie is Long Time Passing. That's the brochure. I'm just holding it up for the camera, and it's currently being shown in Osaka. And
and one thing, may I add one thing? Sure. I'm trying to have the English version to be seen in America because that's where people need to see it. But Americans, somehow it's more difficult to have it seen in America. Europe is easier. Apathy?
why is it difficult to be seen in America?
I don't know. They are more reluctant to, they're less interested in this kind of subject.
Well, that's a very sad indictment. Thank you so much to our two speakers today for coming and talking about this very difficult subject, but also a subject which is, as you've both stated, ongoing, a live issue, something which pertains to the health of people in Okinawa, in Vietnam, and other parts of the world right now. And of course, the issue of forever chemicals from US bases as well. You know, this goes out on YouTube afterwards, so hopefully other journalists will look at the talk and will pick up the thread and start investigating this and writing stories about it. Thank you very much to both of you. I wish you all the success with your movie.
Thank you very much.
Do show your appreciation, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.